And so today's session that we have together is focused on empowering positive change and action through your organization or you yourself as an individual. If, let's say you're not part of an organization right now. The reason why I wanted to come with this particular topic of conversation is because at the Center for Civic Justice, we're all about putting you in a position where if you are really passionate about an issue affecting your community, that you have an opportunity to develop the skills and the abilities to be able to address that challenge and take it full on, and see how you can make a real and meaningful change for others and for communities throughout throughout anywhere or anywhere you are. So instead of this being a formal presentation, I'm using a Google Jamboard, which you may or may not be familiar with yourself, but I hope this will make it a little bit more interactive for all of us. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. So if you want to open up that link yourself, this will make it a little bit more interactive and make it hands-on. So if you can open up that link, and we'll do a little bit of a test so you can get a little bit familiar with what this is all about. So this is just a fun way to be able to interact with each other instead of just listening to someone present for 50 minutes. So I'm going to get us started with our first Jamboard for today. And to kind of get you familiar with it, I have a really basic question is, where are you from? And so where are you located? Where are you right now? Where is home for you? So for me, I'm from Long Island. It's a love-hate relationship. I love Stony Brook, but I hate Long Island. But because I love Stony Brook, I'm not going anywhere. But I'd love to hear where you're from to kind of get a sense of who's here. So if you go to on the left side of your screen, there's this little sticky note. And you can write on the sticky note whatever you want. And then you can choose your color, and then you can save it and then move it around on the screen. So if everyone wants to do that, take a moment to share with us who you are. That would be awesome. You can also change the size of your Post-it note. You can turn it and twist it. So if everyone wants to take a second to do that, that would be awesome. Don't put your actual address because we don't need to know exactly where you live. But it'd be awesome if everyone shares. So Jacob is at Stony Brook, but is from Binghamton. We've got Ithaca. We've got born in Ecuador, but home is Coram. We've got Hollis, Queens. That's awesome. So lots of Long Island, but a little bit of upstate. That's great. Cool. To kind of get a sense, who's here? Maybe if you want to put in the chat, who's living on campus? Anyone living off campus? Cool. So this was just a little bit of a test to see how the Jamboard works for all of us. So it seems like it's working. We've got Kenny, who's in India right now. That's awesome. So now we have got a global presentation. So now we're going to have to take this to new heights. So now we've got no pressure. So now that we're a little bit familiar with the Jamboard itself, what you're going to do is you're going to click this little right arrow at the top. I realized I should have told you that beforehand, but you're going to click this little right arrow at the top, and that's going to bring you to the next Jamboard. And for this one, I want you to think about an issue that you're passionate about. So while we're going to get with each Jamboard, we're going to get a little bit deeper and deeper. But for this one, I just want to get a sense of what are the issues that you're passionate about that affect your community. When I say hyper locally, I mean like your community where you live right now, like you yourself, your neighbors. What are issues that affect your community? You can also think about it in the sense of entire country. You can think about it for your state. You can think about it for the whole world. So what are issues that that you're passionate about? So again, you can take one of those sticky notes or multiple sticky notes and write your thoughts out on there. I put food insecurity as my example because It's the first thing I got involved with when I was a student back in the day at Stony Brook. And now I oversee the food pantry that we have here on campus. And so I'm grateful that we're able to continue to support addressing this issue. So if folks want to take a post-it note, this is your chance to share what's something that's important to you, that you're passionate about. Again, if you can move them around, because they'll all pile up on top of each other. So we've got lack of mental health awareness. We've got mental health normalizing therapy and seeking help. So all right, so I'm already noticing a trend. We have suicide awareness, environmental conservation. That's awesome. Sustainability, sustainable transport. That's great. What else? And you don't have to limit it to one. If there's more than one thing that you are passionate about, thinking about, feel free to throw it out there as well. So I see more sustainability, more mental health awareness. Anything else? What's for whoever wrote DEI? What is for those who might not be familiar? What is DEI? Anyone want to share what that is? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Thank you. So these are just a few things, right? Issues that affect our community, and you've highlighted that these are a couple of things that you're passionate about yourself. But there's so much more, right? That we can talk about racial justice. We can talk about homelessness amongst students or populations in general. We can talk about income inequality. We can talk about lack of universal access to daycare. So if you're a parent or you have dependents, maybe that's an issue for you when it comes to going to school or going to work. So those are a number of different examples, right, of issues that you're passionate about, other people are passionate about. And I love that people are getting familiar with how to use this Jamboard and changing the size of things. This is great. So if you click on that little arrow again at the top, we're going to go to the next Jamboard. And so I'd love to get a sense of folks, because again, I don't know who you are necessarily. So what organization or organizations are you a part of here at Stony Brook? And also let us know if you're not part of an organization. And if you are a leader within a particular organization, let us know what your leadership role is so we can kind of get a sense of who's here. That would be great. So I made up an organization, Sea Wolves for Pandas. I just love pandas so much. I will coordinate any events about pandas. I actually, speaking of pandas, have my little friend right here. This is my smallest one, actually. My biggest one is the size of me, 6 feet tall, sits in my room. I love it so much. So we've got the president of Pocket Theater. Hi there. We've got the president of Free Will Cycling Collective. We've got Hindu Student Council. We've got the president of Undergraduate Anthropology Society and the president of Alpha Nu Zeta. Hopefully I said that correctly. We've got a Red Watch Band care team member. We've got Delta Sigma Pi. I love this. We've got more Undergraduate Anthropology Society. This is great. So we have a lot of different types of organizations too, right? It's not just one particular theme or particular effort that I see here today, which is great. So I'm really hopeful that some of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later, we'll be able to kind of look at it from the perspective of your organization specifically. That the things that we're going to talk about today could apply to anyone. And so I'd love for you to be able to think about it in the context of your organization. So we're going to go to the next Jamboard. So if you're going to click that little arrow again. And now we're going to get a little bit deeper. We're going to get more to the core of why we're here today. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how how do you think your organization creates community. So when you think about your organization and the members who are part of your organization, how do you connect them? How do you help them grow, and how do you help them thrive right now as a group? Because it's taken, sometimes some of your organizations might have existed for years, some of them might be a little bit newer. So how have you, to this point as an organization, helped people to feel like they're part of a community with that organization? So what are the things that you might do to help bring them together and to help them to grow close to each other and to be the best that they possibly can? So again, you can take a post-it note and put some of your thoughts on there. I know this is getting a little bit deeper now. So I put an example of host professional development workshops that I know that there's a lot of organizations, including um, fraternities and sororities, that oftentimes host a lot of professional development workshops for their members, whether it be resume building, mock interviews, preparing for the next steps in your career beyond Stony Brook. There's so many different things, but that's just one example. That there's so many other cool things you might be doing. How do you bring your members together? So again, take those sticky notes and throw them out there. So I see provide leadership opportunities. What kind of leadership opportunities do you provide to your members? Feel free to take another post-it note and attach it to that one so we can start to get some cool thoughts going. Oh, wow. Oh, a lot of words. This is great. Playing games, movie nights, group chats, informal lecture series and discussions, off-campus trips, study groups. That's awesome. And I'm noticing a trend of, it doesn't have to be something super well developed. It doesn't have to be something that you put an incredible amount of time into. It's really a matter of, how do you build an environment that has all these kind of different pieces? Oh, you moved my title. That's all good. Let's see what else we got here. So we hold shop hours every week until the world fell apart. That's valid. Anyone with an interest in cycling can drop by and work on bikes, work with their hands. That's awesome. We have weekly theater related meetings as well as create shows together. We connect people who love theater together to create some pretty great pieces. Yes, I've also been to some of your shows and they're fantastic. So shameless plug for you all too. Y'all are great. For Red Watchman, you have 25 members and we have bi-weekly meetings and staff bonding. We hang out in the office. That's great. So this is awesome. So a lot of you are doing formal and informal things in order to build community. I also love that someone mentioned about how you get faculty involved in building community too, that panels led by faculty can really help kind of cement some of what you do, especially if your organization is focused on something very academic or scholarly. That bringing in people who are part of the community that have been doing this work for years can really help to put your members in a position to be successful. So I'm going to take a look at the next Jamboard real quick. So we're going to go to the next one together. And this one we're going to spend a little bit more time on because this is kind of getting us to the crux of why we're here in some ways. So we talked about how you create community, but how does the organization and the community that you've created help to now create change in the community? If you're doing that. So if your organization is doing anything to help change or better the community in some way, how are you doing that? And if your organization isn't doing that, I'm curious, maybe why aren't you doing that? Or is it just not something that you've thought about as an organization? So what are some of the ways that you do that, or why don't you do that right now? And again, feel free to throw that on a post-it note, because that'll kind of get us a little bit deeper into why we're here today. An example I put on here was we host food drives and we donate the items to the Stony Brook Food Pantry. So shameless plug that if you're an organization that's looking to support food insecurity in some way, to help make sure students and other members of our community have access to healthy and nutritious food. Food drives might be one way in which you can do meaningful engagement this semester. That engagement can look different this semester, or this semester offers opportunities for different forms of engagement. And a food drive can be a really meaningful and easy way in which you can achieve that with your members. So keep throwing those thoughts out on the Jamboard. So far I'm working with my VP to do a pen pal program for seniors at assisted living facilities to keep them mentally active. We were also planning a campus cleanup. That's awesome. That's really fantastic. What if you want to add maybe what organization you're part of, because that's cool. I'd love to hear more about those two initiatives that you're working on at some point. I see we try, but I think we have a ways to go, hence why I'm here. Thank you for your honesty. And I'm glad you came, because hopefully we'll be able to help with that, even just a little bit. You take parts off of different vehicles and put them on rebuilt, repaired bicycles. We'll be doing this again as soon as we get a valid e-board. That's great. That's also valid. Oh, wow. There's more. So we've got before COVID and hopefully after, we held certain theater shows and theater workshops and donated all money earned to organizations that help kids who love theater learn about it and grow their craft. That's amazing that you're connecting what you do to now support future generations of people to explore what you love. There's nothing better than that in some ways, that you're helping to build the next generation of pocket theater members in some ways. That's awesome. Red Watchman, we help educate on alcohol and other drugs. We train on safe drinking, bystanders, duties and responsibilities. We distribute free health kits with sanitizer, tissues, thermometers. That's great. That's awesome. This is fantastic. I'm loving this. Organizing campus cleanups, pushing members to complete training such as QPR and Red Watch Band. That is one of the one really great way in which you can help make a difference in your community right now. That there's this Center for Prevention and Outreach that hosts these phenomenal trainings that help you to support your peers to make good choices, not just for themselves, but to keep others safe too. And so by going through these trainings and getting these certifications, you're putting yourself in a position to be an active bystander and to help educate and support others who are part of your community to do the right thing. So I'm loving all of that. Yeah. I don't know if that's how you create change, but I love that. That's an emotion and a feeling that I'm getting right now. So does anyone feel like their organization could potentially be doing more in order to support their community and to help create positive change? Maybe if you want to throw that in the chat. Or do you feel like you're doing everything? Like you've hit your limit and there's nothing else you want to do at this point? What threshold do you think you're at? Like you're not doing enough, you want to do more, or you're doing enough right now? And again, you can throw that on a post note, you can throw that in the chat. I'd love to hear where you think you're at as an organization, or as an individual. Where do you think you're at? Like, do you feel like you can be doing more to help your community in some way? Radio silence. Can you hear me? Who thinks their organization could do more? You can use the little raise your hand function in Zoom if you want. I see a post-it note that I feel like I could do more, but I never have time. That's interesting. I think that's a really good point. Does anyone else feel that way, that you want to be able to do more to help your community, but you don't feel like you have enough time to do it? Interesting. So when you think about that, I'm reading through the chat that a lot of you are feeling like there's more opportunities and there's more of a ways to go with these sort of things. And then also you're just thinking about the context of the time that you're in, right? That it's not you're while you want to be able to do things, maybe you have to think differently about it. That you might not be able to go in person and do X, Y, and Z anymore, or you might only be able to do one of these things now, and instead you have to rethink how you're going to approach the other two things. And so I think this is an opportunity where you've now identified, right, some of the things that you're doing as an organization right now, which is great. But now you're also identifying that you either want to do more, that it's okay to be where you're at too, that this might be a time where we have to really kind of just come together as a community and push through in a lot of ways. But also some of you really feel like you've hit the nail on the head. You're at where you're at in terms of your ability to help, and now this is an opportunity where you can bring your knowledge, your experience, and your excitement about creating change in your community, and making a difference to other people. Because I see at least one person says, you think you're doing enough or you're doing a lot, and that's great. So now you have an opportunity where you can help empower others to do just that. So that's great. That's awesome. So um, oh, I see a good point in here. I feel like we often talk about doing more, but sometimes it stops at that. I think we need to focus on putting ideas into action. Amelia, that's awesome. I think you in some ways really hit it. That we oftentimes do a lot of talking and not a lot of doing. And that's why I like to have these conversations, because I hope some of the things that we talk about today, or kind of the environment that we create, is helping to overcome some of those barriers, that you recognize that. So what are you going to do to overcome the talk, just the sheer talking, and start to commit to some of those next steps? So we're going to go to the next Jamboard together, and this is where I'm going to kind of walk you through some things that I'm always thinking about, that can help you to create positive change. So if this is how I think about positive change, and doing that in the context of yourself or doing that in the context of your organization. I think the most important thing, and why I really love the conference that you've had today and the theme that's been established, because I think in order to create any sort of change, you have to understand who you are and the community and organizations that you're a part of. And that starts with precisely your mission and your values. So when your organization was created, or the organization that you are today, you look at who you are. Like when you talk to other people about who you are as an organization, what are the first things that you say to them? Because the first things that you say to them set the tone for the type of organization who you are. And then what do you instill in your members? What are the things that your members bring to the community in order to make that community the best it can possibly be? Whether it be mutual respect, a passion for something, that every organization has a particular purpose. And so your values often align with the type of work or the thing that you are passionate about. So before you can actually even consider creating change, you have to understand yourself. And that's a really deep conversation, and there's no way we're going to have enough time to do that today. And I hope that there's going to be other opportunities where you can start to better understand who you are as an individual leader, but also a leader who is potentially part of an organization. And then anyone who's here who's not necessarily part of an organization, that when you do join one, to kind of figure out like where do you fall, like where do you what do you bring to that organization that is going to help that organization to be successful. So now that you have an understanding of who you are and or who or what your organization is, again rooted in your mission and your values, that's when you can start to take some of those steps. And there's two first steps that you're going to take. That first step is to identify the what. Like what issue do you want to address? That you have to start there. You can't just go to the point of that you're going to do something. Before you can do something, you have to understand what it is that you actually want to do and why you want to do it. So let me give you an example. So you could very easily just jump right into hosting a food drive. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're creating meaningful and positive change. That before you just say, all right, I'm going to email the food pantry and say, we're going to host a food drive to help you. Let's take it a couple of steps back. First, well, let's think about the what. In the context of hosting a food drive, what is the issue that you want to address? So if someone wants to answer that question, that let's say we were going to host a food drive, what is the issue that we're trying to address when we host a food drive? Can feel free to unmute yourself so you don't just have to hear me too if you'd like, or you can throw it in the chat. What is the issue that you're trying to address in this case? Food insecurity. Jacob, thank you. Appreciate it. So we're addressing food insecurity in this particular case. And think about it, you're in a situation where you're in my position right now where, all right, I want to address food insecurity, but why do I want to actually address this issue? What is this issue all about? I'm not going to ask you to answer that question right now because maybe you have to do a little bit of research. Maybe you don't have a really strong understanding of the issue. But before you do something, in order to really get something meaningful and approach something with the greatest of purpose, you do need to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So in the case of food insecurity, why would I want to address this issue? So I'll give you a basic answer so that as an example, that I want to address food insecurity because I know that 1 out of every 3 students, college students in general, don't have access to enough healthy food options to get them through the day. That if you were in a classroom and you look to your left, you look to your right, and you look at the person who's sitting right in front of you, one of those people very likely might not have enough food to eat, healthy food options to eat every day. And that is why I want to address food insecurity, because I want to make sure that that person who might not have enough of those options can access those options as part of this community. So that's the why. And that's something that we need to focus a little bit more of our time and energy on when we do the things that we do. Because when someone asks you why you're doing this thing, that you'll actually have an answer, that you'll have done what you need to do in order to really start to take those steps. So does anyone have any questions about that at all? I think that's a really important thing that we sometimes miss when we're trying to do service, we're trying to create change. But does anyone have any questions about that in particular? Okay, cool. So in terms of next steps, so we're talking about things beyond the what and the why. So now we know what issue we want to address, and we know why we want to do it. Now we're ready to take the step of making it happen in some way. But before we talk about that, we need to connect with the community where we want to create the change. So you want to address food insecurity and why you want to address it. But now, what's that next step? The next step is to connect with someone who's part of the community that can help you to create that change. So you are not the person who can just go right on in and do something. You have to connect with someone who's part of that community that can help you to facilitate that, because there are members of your community that might be a little bit more of an expert when it comes to that particular issue. So for example, with food insecurity, like if you wanted to do something here at Stony Brook University, you would be connecting with me at the food pantry because we are really focused on making sure that students who are food insecure have access to what they need. So you would reach out to me, you can email me, you can call me, you can send a carrier pigeon to send me a message. However you want to get a message out to me, you can contact me. And we would meet and we can talk about it, or we can just have an email conversation or a phone call conversation to talk about what you're looking to do. And maybe I have some ideas, because as someone who might have a little bit more of an expertise with this particular issue, I can give you some advice and some ideas about how you might be able to best and more effectively approach supporting us in addressing this issue together. So through that conversation, we can identify some other things. We can identify the who. So who are we trying to create a positive change for? You might not find that in your research, but with food insecurity, like I found that answer already, which is great because I know that one third of college students don't have access to enough healthy food options every day. So I know that's who I want to create positive change for. I also mentioned creating positive change with, because depending on how the type of issue you're trying to address, you might not be doing it for somebody, but you might be doing it with them. Maybe you're hosting an after-school program, or you're teaching a lesson of something. Maybe you're for pocket theater. Maybe you're doing lessons for youth at some point. There's a difference in terms of the language that you use. It's whether you're doing creating change with somebody or creating change for somebody. So that's something that's really important to be able to distinguish as well. But once you know the who, you can start to think about the where and the when. So where do you want to create this change, and when do you want to create it? So that's now you're starting to get into the logistics of things, of solidifying whether it be a room that you're going to be doing this in, whether it be an in-person room or a virtual room, or maybe the person who is an expert in your community can give you some advice on where to do your work. And then the when. When is the best time of the year to potentially do it? Because depending on the issue that you're trying to address, maybe it's better to do it at one point or another. So to give you an example, for food insecurity, some of the best times of the year to do food drives is at the middle of the semester for us. And the reason why I say that is because we're pretty good on food during the first several weeks of the semester. But then as our services are used, our shelves start to deplete. And so by hosting food drives in the middle of the semester, you're helping us to make sure that our shelves are fully stocked at the end of the semester, when students might be you all are going into final exams. And we really want to make sure that those who are in food insecurity have access to the food that they need. Maybe you're going into winter break and you are worried about not having access to enough food to get you through winter break. So by having our shelves stocked during that time, it could be really, really helpful. So the when is so important. And another example is if you're working with youth or children, depending on the things that you're doing. Maybe during the school year is not a good time. Maybe something during the summer or during the December, January breaks could be a lot more helpful or beneficial for someone who you're trying to work with. So that's a little bit of the where and the when. But then the how is probably the most critical piece at that point. Now that you know who you want to create positive change with and for, you kind of have a sense of where and when you want to do something. How are you actually going to do it? That's where your community partners come in. The experts that you connect with can really come into play. Is that you can work together, or if you feel knowledgeable enough, that you can kind of create a plan of how you're actually going to tackle this issue with your members or yourself. With a food drive, for example, maybe you're hosting it for a week in the middle of October, and you really want to make sure that people know about your food drive. So you are going to push it to the ends of the earth through social media. You're going to ask all of your members to share it on their Instagram stories. You're going to ask them to tag a friend. You're going to create some sort of competition amongst your members to get the most people to donate food items. And make sure that they note that that they referred you in some way, so you can kind of build that excitement and recognize members of your organization who are doing the most, or really putting in a lot of effort and energy to help address this issue. And that could really incentivize and mobilize people to do some really awesome things. So the how is so important. And there's other people on this campus who can really help you to think through the how. That you have your program advisor and your faculty advisor. So those are two people who you and your organization are connected with in some way, who can kind of help you to think through some creative ideas too. That you all are the most creative people in the world. That I'm now part of a different generation, so I don't know what's cool anymore. So there's things that you know that can really help to make your work and your efforts really, really successful. But know that there are other people here who can give you different perspectives that can help you to navigate different challenges as you're thinking about how you can approach creating this positive change in the end. So does anyone have any questions about that at all? Awesome. So the last step, just 1 second. So the last step is to just do it, right? Now that you've thought through the who, what, where, when, why, and how, you've connected with other people, you understand who you are, who you are as an organization, do the thing. Follow through. Like Amelia said, we do a lot of talking sometimes, but we got to do some of that doing. We got to take those actions. So maybe these steps can help you to go from talking to doing. And so maybe that's something that you consider as an organization or as an individual going forward. And when you do this thing, when you create this change, it's not just that. It's not just that you do the things that you do and then you're done. There are some really important things that you need to do after the fact. That after you create change or after you do service or give your time, you need to reflect about your experience. That is so important. And there are some organizations that do a really phenomenal job of taking the time of reflecting upon what they do. And so the things that you should be thinking about in terms of your reflection are what went well. So in terms of what you did, what went well? And then in terms of what you did, what could have gone better? Because nothing is necessarily perfect, but it's really important to recognize the things that we could be improving upon in order to do better in the future or to create better experiences in the future for others. And the last thing I would mention about reflecting is about how did this experience impact me as an individual? Because you do these things not just for the sake of doing them. You're doing them to make a difference. But how is that experience helping you to grow as an individual? Are you getting a better understanding of the issue? Do you just appreciate the fact that you are helping to make a difference in someone's life and you understand the difference that you're making now? All of those things are really important to think about and consider when you're doing the reflection about your experience. So that's really important. So anytime you do something that you're trying that helps to make a difference in other people's lives in the future, commit in some way to reflecting upon that experience and make that something that is just normal for you and normal for your members as well. So that's kind of my little flow and process with what it means to create positive change. It's not it's not everything, and it's not the only way in which to approach it, but it's one way in which you can consider doing that for yourself and doing that with your organization in the future. So I know we're getting closer to time since I think we have about 8 minutes left or so. So I'm going to go to the next Jamboard together. And this, I believe, is our last one. So you're going to click that arrow again. And I want you to think about some next steps. So I gave you some information. You shared a lot today, and I really appreciate everything that you've shared. But what is one next step that you can take after everything that we talked about today? What are you going to bring back to if you're a member of an organization, what are you going to bring back to your organization as you go into this upcoming semester? So what are some things that you think about? You can put them on a post-it note and throw out some thoughts about what is one next step you can take yourself or you could take with your organization in order to start to think about the great work that you're already doing or some new things that you could be thinking about potentially going forward. So the post-it note I put was a shameless plug about the previous steps that we talked about, that it's important to remember these steps as you consider taking positive change. Thank you to our first brave soul. So I see revising our core mission and values and discuss in an e-board meeting what is the best course of action to best uphold them. That's awesome. That is some really important recognition about you and your organization, and that these are really concrete steps that you can take. I realize that my club does a lot to create positive change in the community, but we do not really take the time to reflect on what we have done. I would like to integrate more reflecting. That's awesome. And I'm really glad to hear that. And I hope that that's one of those things that you can easily kind of follow through on, because those are basic questions. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. It's just three or four basic things. What went well? What could have gone better? And what am I getting out of this experience? And what is the change I'm actually making through what I do? So I really love that. I see the trend of reflection. That's awesome. And I really hope in some way that's something that you're able to carry forward together. So that's really what I had for you all today. And I'm really glad that we had this time together. And I hope we can have a little bit of time now for anyone who wants to ask any questions that they might have before I know you go into your next breakout. So what I will do is I'm going to stop the recording now, since that's the end of the presentation. So if there's anything you want to share now, because we're not in a recording, you're more than welcome to do so. So I will stop the recording right now. So does anyone have any questions or any other thoughts at this point about anything? This is your time. You've got my full, undivided attention. Oh, awkward.